Cutlery has spent the last couple of years designing a knife that would rival traditional Japanese knives in the sense of feel, blade geometry, and performance, but being much easier to maintain and sharpen, while at the same time being able to handle a little bit of extra tough love without the fear of cracking, fracturing, or chipping the blade. And we finally did it with the Zuma chef's knife. This is a Japanese style chef's knife made with American stainless steel out of one of our partner manufacturers who is a fantastic knife maker in China. This chef's knife is a mashup of traditional and modern design and performs better than or similar to other chef's knives that range in that $300 to $400 mark, but this coming in at half the investment. So in this video, I'm going to share with you all of the features and specs about the new Zuma chef's knife, while also putting it to use with various cutting techniques so you can see the blade in action, getting started with some onion julienne. Okay, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the blade, because it's by far the most important aspect of any knife. And when we were designing this knife, there were three main things about the blade that we absolutely had to have. The first thing that mattered most to us when developing this blade was we insisted that the knife had to be hammer forged. Now, although this is labor intensive, the hammering process is worthwhile because the steel's grain structure is better aligned, increasing strength and durability. We dialed in the Zuma to a 62 Rockwell hardness, as we found that to be the sweet spot for a blade that holds an edge while also being resistant to chipping and fracturing. The combination of the hammer forged American steel and the 62 Rockwell was imperative if we were going to make a knife as thin behind the edge as we reasonably could without making it too fragile. Slicing paper is pretty cool, I get it, it looks fun, but how you really determine the sharpness of a knife is with a tomato. If you can cut a tomato easily without getting caught up on the skin, then you got yourself a sharp blade. Not too bad. I'm telling you, this knife, it just flows. Something we can say about this and many other higher end knives, but generally the higher end knives, not one that's the sub $200 mark, is that you don't need to use a lot of force. Let the knife work with you. I mean, I am hardly holding this at the pinch grip, and I'm just letting basically a little bit of downward to hit to the cutting board, and then it's just letting the blade just pull through. If you do use this harder like you would a more softer steel Western knife, it's going to hold up better than most other Japanese knives at this Rockwell hardness, but there's really no need to, because all you're really doing is increasing the amount of honing and potential sharpening that the blade will need. But again, we designed this knife so that it could withstand a little extra tough love. I'm done with my notes here, so we might as well just give it a little go. Now, one of the things that we also absolutely had to have when it came to developing this knife was a knife that is hand ground and hand sharpened. So that's what we did with the Zuma. All right, I don't want to cut myself. We'll stop there. So this blade has what we're calling a dual taper, meaning that from the heel to the tip, there is a taper, and there's also a taper from the spine to the edge. This type of geometry allows the knife to basically glide effortlessly through foods, whether you're pushing, tapping, or slicing without that wedge type of resistance. Okay, we saw a tap chop, so let's do a push chop. Well, let's get rid of the pith first. Push. The skin of a bell pepper is similar to a tomato in the sense of it is the nemesis of a knife and will quickly show you if your knife is dull. Some Battonet. All right, let's do something fancy real quick just to show the nimbleness of this blade. This is called a Paysanne pepper, which is basically where you come in at an angle and you're going to fillet out the flesh of the pepper. And then you can come in here and you can do little triangles, or you can cut them on a real fine bias like that. This is great for finishing hot dishes that you just need a little bit of a fresh pop to. So let's say you've got some sauteed carrots in butter, a little bit of lemon zest and salt, and then you want to throw these in right before you plate it. It'll soften them up just enough, but you still get a little bit of a crunch, and this blade can handle doing intricate cuts like this. Let's move on to the finish of the Zuma, which starts with what is referred to as a Kurochi finish or a blacksmith's finish, and is a result of the forging process. Kurochi finishes vary from being absolutely stellar to some leaving black smudges on your hand, while others are lacquered and can have a little bit of an odd feeling at the pinch grip, which can also eventually wear off. So to maintain consistency, the Zuma goes through an additional black dye process, making the Kurochi finish a little smoother and more wear resistant. Personally, I would describe this as almost like a hybrid Kurochi and black Nasiji type of finish. The mid blade is ground and polished to a hazy Kasumi finish, while the edge is highly polished. Now, as you can see in the close-up shots throughout the video, as well as photos on our site, the mid blade and the edge of the Zuma have a very rustic, almost worn-in look. Think of it this way. No one likes it when their perfectly polished blade ends up with scratches along the side after just a couple of prep sessions. So we kept the polishing on the Zuma very raw, rustic looking, worn in. And as far as I'm concerned, between the Kurochi, black Nasiji, Kazumi, and the rustic polished edge, this is a pretty badass looking knife. All right, some cucumber. Again, you can use this blade at different angles, just like many others. But one of the things that I've noticed with this knife is that, again, on the cutting board, it's more forgiving. You can twist and turn and scrape and things like that. And it's just, I don't know, it's more forgiving. It's also, like I showed you with the pepper, it's delicate. It does have a little bit of a thicker blade feel compared to other razors, or I would say compared to other knives that are coming in with this type of geometry. It's just a good feel. You can see by the push chop that I did with the pepper as well as with the cucumbers here is that the blade makes a lot of surface contact with the cutting board. It's going more than halfway up the blade. So with that push, chop, slice motion forward, or even the tap, you're able to utilize a good amount of the blade, while at the same time, the curvature of the tip here works really well for the rock chop. And not just the curvature of the tip, but the fact that at the heel here, it is 2 inches. It's a little bit taller than most Japanese Gyuto knives. And with that extra height, you just get a little bit more leverage and flow with the rock. So speaking of rock, let's cut up some green onions. I always start with a push going into the white part of the scallion or green onion. And now that I'm into the green, I can get into a rock chop. We've seen tap, push, rock, and slicing. This blade can do it all. So regardless of your comfort level with various types of cutting techniques, you'll be fine. The third thing that was an absolute must when designing this knife was making sure that the spine and the choil were both polished. This takes a little bit of extra time, therefore production cost, but seriously, every knife maker should be doing this. It's terrible when you get a brand new knife and after 15 minutes of prep at the pinch grip, the inside of your pointer finger from rubbing on a hard right angle sharp spine or the inside of your middle finger are experiencing fatigue. 15 minutes, that's all it takes. And you've got dents in your fingers and it's uncomfortable. So the Zuma spine and choil are polished. Where you really feel finger fatigue with ingredients while you're prepping, especially with a blade that is not polished properly, is whenever you're dealing with really tough ingredients like a sweet potato, some carrots, squash, etc. That force that you have to use going down, it can leave a mark. Not bad. This is where I wish my dog were here because she loves carrots and she would have a couple little coins to chew on. We went very traditional Japanese with the octagonal ebony wood handle, which is also lacquered to help prevent warping due to humidity, or if you accidentally leave it in the sink for a couple of minutes. But please don't do that. Seriously, no knife deserves to be soaking in a sink. The other thing that's great about an octagonal handle is that the shape of this fits pretty much every hand, whether you're right-handed, left-handed, big hands, little hands, big palms, long fingers, it doesn't matter. It's going to fit comfortably. Now, as you can see, I'm holding this just above the tang, right beneath the Zuma logo, and it is perfectly balanced. But just like any other Japanese style knife, if you hold it just at the tang or at the handle, it will be blade heavy. All right, let's cut up some fake crab. Just do a little bit of a push chop here. I'm making some type of crab connie salad. And yes, this is fake crab. This is made of what? I think it's pollock. All the connie salad you get in most Japanese restaurants is going to be made of the fake stuff, but I don't care because it tastes good. You can see like I feel like I'm hardly even holding this knife. It's just getting a little bit of tap there, pushing through. Actually, with this, you don't really need to push because it's so delicate. I have been using this knife for a couple of months. I was sent the original concept design, and I have beat the crap out of this knife. I have used it more so like my German softer steel or global softer steel knives just to see what it could do. And I've hardly had to hone this at all. It really does hold an edge. And the times that I have honed it, a couple passes, and it just brought it right back to life. And what I mean by that, when I had to hone it, might have had a little bit of extra give when trying to go into a tomato or pepper. Boom, 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 4 swipes, and it was basically back to what it is right now. That's enough crab. Let's move on to the cilantro. A lot of the times with a Japanese knife, you can't get into a good mince because you don't want to be pivoting like this with the blade and end up hurting the edge. So what you end up doing is this, going into almost this chiffonade type of bunching with a push chop very thinly to get everything started. And since I've been using more Japanese knives than not, this is actually how I prep my cilantro regardless of the knife that I am using. But once I get this thinly sliced, that's when I'm going to go into that European style rock chop / cross chop, which is the seesaw pivoting back and forth. Okay, so now I can start my pivot. I would not do this with that. None of them, almost none of these, none of those. Probably wouldn't do it with half of the ones up there. But I would do this all day long with my German knives. So I'm not afraid of doing it with this blade. Wouldn't do that either with a lot of them. And, oh, I only had 1 tomato. Well, let's look at this. If you can do that and then do that, you've got an edge that can stay sharp. And one last thing to show you, which would be the packaging. Very nicely packaged compared to a lot of knives as a whole. So when this is in here, you get a little hello care card, and then the very tip guard, a plastic sheath, a dry packet, silicone packet here, which is great, even though this isn't carbon steel. And then this little spacer there to basically keep the knife level and secure during packaging. So that is the Zuma packaging. Okay, so who is this knife for? The first type of person the Zuma is perfect for would be someone who has German knives and wants to dabble in the world of Japanese knives. Think of this as an excellent hybrid. It still requires a little bit more TLC than a lot of the German knives out there, but it can handle much more abuse than most forged Japanese knives, and it's easy to hone and sharpen. The next person this knife is great for would be someone who is very familiar with higher end Japanese knives, but they want something that feels and looks and performs similarly, but is much more of a workhorse and can handle a bit of tough love, as you saw with mincing the cilantro. And finally, the last person this knife is ideal for is someone who simply wants to add another badass knife to their collection without breaking the bank. So there you have it, folks. This is the Zuma 8-inch chef's knife by Cutlery and More. It is the first in the series of knives. We already have a bunka and a petty knife in the works because it'll just make the perfect little trio. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Chef Brandon with Cutlery and More. Be sure to check out the Zuma as well as some of our other exclusive series at cutleryandmore.com. Thanks for tuning in.